来い。お前の血がなかったら仲間たちが。うわっ。たく世話の焼ける。頼りになる。逃げ回っとけ。
If you hang around the Souls games community, or maybe you just play Souls games alone like a complete freak and you went on the hunt for your next prey after finishing the same one 10 times over, then you might have heard about a game called Code Vein. But if you didn't, then it's basically edgy anime Souls-like, made by the same people who brought you edgy anime Monster Hunter, as if that shit wasn't anime and edgy as fuck already. But let's hit the brakes right here and now before we begin this wonderful magical journey and ask ourselves, what is a Souls like? If you played any Soulsborne game, then you might already have an idea, but let me not be a total asshole for once and assume everyone has played every game that I did, and let's place a neat little segment here, where I go down a little checklist of characteristics most commonly found in Souls-like games for the benefit of the uninitiated. A Souls-like game is an action-based, third-person RPG with all of the stats and equipments and builds that usually come with the RPG territory, that usually take place in overtly hostile lands with dark atmosphere, which are often open world, but not too open world, being basically highly interconnected corridors akin to Super Metroid or the more recent 2D Castlevanias, which are filled with checkpoints which when activated will fully heal you and return you to them upon death, as checkpoints often do. But using them also resurrects every single enemy you killed, and it might reset some traps as well, which sucks not only because of that, but also because the main currency that you use to buy stuff is also what you use to upgrade your character, and all of it is lost when you die. Unless, of course, you can make your way back to where you died to recover your stuff. Oh, and also they got a reputation for being really fucking hard. But that, of course, depends on the individual. It's actually the case that thanks to all of the game-breaking shit that you can do with RPG systems plus grinding, that sometimes the games are not really that hard at all, but they are undeniably way less forgiving of mistakes than the usual modern game. And Code Vein ticks all of those boxes, but it is also anime. Not really classic shonen style happy-go-lucky adventures with some more adult stuff in the mix, but more like really modern edgy tones, and I mean it when I say modern, not like the old 90s OVA you found on a random VHS that traumatized you forever as a kid. It is edgy but sleek, adult looking and sounding at first glance, but actually more teenage style cool modern anime edgy that I'm talking about. I didn't really watch Tokyo Ghoul, but the masks here remind me of that after seeing those things around for years at the height of its popularity, so yeah, let's go with that, it's probably similar to that. Or, you know, maybe we can do a direct comparison to the God Eater games since the tone is similar, and given that, well, you know, the developers who did that one also did this one, so, you know, it might be a bit similar, yeah? But let's go beyond that superficial first look, and let us look closely to the real meat of the matter, which is how come the characters are all technically vampires, yet nobody gets a sexy bite. Wait, shit, that's probably the wrong question. I mean, we already know what makes Code Vein similar to the Soul series, so what is it that it actually does differently? We got to start from somewhere, so we might as well start from the environmental aesthetic, I hope I pronounced that correctly. Which sounds superficial at first glance, but you know, style also is part of the substance after all, so it's always worth taking a little closer look. And most Souls-like games try to be all medieval and shit. And let me be clear to say that it often sometimes results in some beautiful, haunting, or just straight up depressing locations with a lot of thought put into it. But the fact that most of them take place during or after a weird apocalyptic event thing, kinda, sort of, doesn't really sink in much to me, since this might be weird for you, but unfortunately I wasn't alive during medieval times. Sorry about that. But also, you never really see the place when they are unfucked, so seeing them after the fucking doesn't really impact as much as Code Vein's modern world of familiar steel cars and concrete buildings and parking lots getting run through by big, thick apocalypse spikes. It's unique and different among Souls games, is what I'm trying to say. And it's also not afraid of going complete bonkers and making you go from the familiar destroyed cities to cities that are destroyed on the top of frosty peaks, to cities that are perpetually on fire, and that's not even counting all of the old-timey machinery looking things and old-timey outdated looking posters that add the feel that this apocalypse happened on a road where the technology is on 2020, while the style that never went out of vogue was from the 1920s, making it familiar while also being the coolest visually possible version of an apocalypse it could be. And yes, not everything is modern, you will have to deal with some old architecture, there are cathedrals you will visit, hell, your home base is on a cathedral that was built on a rooftop, so hell yeah, you're gonna be seeing that. But even when you do, it's rarely, well, actually never just an old place that got apocalypsed, besides the aforementioned home base, but whether it was built by the apocalypse or in response to it, which means every single time you end up in one of those rather than the dreary, so grounded but still dark fantasy vibes of Souls games, they end up feeling more abstract and surreal, like a video game level built in the real world by absolutely insane monsters, which I assume most people will agree is an apt description of the Cathedral of the Sacred Blood, a place so weird it is simultaneously the most beautiful and cool level in the entire game and the absolute worst one. But yeah, I loved it, I hated it, but I loved it. It's kind of like that. It's an absurdly cool, unique vibe that few other games have. God Eater does have them, but God Eater also had a limited amount of exploration on your living space, and a few repeating maps where you hunt big monsters, which didn't give its world the chance to really display the unique vibes those games got, but here we thankfully get plenty of that, courtesy of the usual spiraling labyrinth of unusual connections that you might expect from Souls games, only aided by the fact that you can't jump, only fall, which means at least you don't have to worry about if you can make a weird ledge jump. But you do have to worry if you can stick the landing on a weird angled jump, which you have to if you want to find hidden goodies and unexpected shortcuts, as well as skip tough battles or get the drop on a group of enemies by finding a way to get behind them. Though not everything works to your advantage, since there are just as many hidey spots for enemies to jump from and take a bite out of your face from unexpected directions, but that's also great on its own, keeping you on your toes all the way, which, what I'm trying to say is that shit's great, not just from an aesthetic perspective, but from a level design one as well. But we can't dwell on the level design and the world building forever, no matter how sexy it is. So let's dwell on the story instead for a little bit. After all, this post-apocalyptic beauty is all in service of creating a creative backdrop to the main plot, which Souls games typically avoid showing directly, but it is here in full display as you'd expect from an anime version of something that already exists. There are long cutscenes, partner banter, and a lot of NPCs, each with a few lines of their own, worries and thoughts that they are, glad to share, as well as life-altering lore to speak to you at any given time, and that's all pretty neat. What's even neater is that the story, it's actually fucking good for once. Fucking finally, praise be to the sun and all that. It isn't anything mind-blowing or particularly plot twisty, and the writing does leave something to be desired sometimes, but honestly, most of the time, I was actually pretty satisfied with it. I enjoyed getting invested in it and seeing it to the end to see if it pays off by then. As for the actual plot, it concerns you, yes, you, or at least a character you created, which he gets or she gets amnesia because of course you got amnesia, you're a protagonist. What did you think you were going to get? The flu? That's not a very heroic disease unless the writers need to pad out time with a sick episode, but anyway. You don't know who you are, but you are helped by a mysterious white-haired girl named Io until you get thrown together with her into slavery by vampires called revenants to find blood beads, basically blood-filled fruit that grows on white trees. And now armed with a single pipe, you must beat the shit out of everything until the guys who enslaved you in the first place die and you are free to go hang out with this guy named Louis, who is a scientist type of guy trying to figure out what is going on with the world. So yeah, just drop that slavery plot point back. Oh, and by the way, you are a revenant too. You see, the world is actually a big question marks. The revenants were created for a reason, possibly to fight something, but no one alive knows quite what exactly. And now revenants mostly fight other revenants who lost control of themselves and were then called the Lost. Yep, the name fits the bill. Blood beads are getting harder to find, the trees are drying up, and the entire city is surrounded by a wall of red mist that keeps the revenants from leaving, presumably so they won't wreak havoc on the outside world. So you know, shit's fucked basically, and it's now up to you and your gang of anime boys and girls to fight and figure out how to survive, to figure out what actually happened, and maybe to figure out a way out of this apocalyptic hellscape. The plot might seem simplistic at first, but what's also not obvious at first glance is the strong hook that the game uses to drag its players to a strong certain mystery tone that drives the plot forward as you slowly start understanding the world around you, as well as the sequence of events that happens while you explore around with your vampire buddies, getting you slowly emotionally attached to them, and at the end it's all very easy to get invested in, especially since even with a strong main plot filled with cutscenes, the answers don't all come easily, and speculating from the various lore as you go along is big fun, even if, unlike Dark Souls, most of the main answers will be given to you by the end of the game. But following along the main storyline isn't the only thing this game has that will try to get you invested into its character and worlds. If there is one major way of delivering the ever-important deepest lore of the game that differs from the usual Souls-like fare, it's through vestige memories, which are also deeply tied to the game's upgrade system. It works like this. The main character is super duper special, and it turns out they can find and use vestiges of other revenants' memories, which are usually found as small clumps of crystallized blood. Find a specific set of them and you can bring them to Io to let you inside the memories of the vestiges. Yes, that's a weird sentence. Allowing you to experience a character's backstory by walking through a frozen-in-time-ish version of the events of their lives. What makes this so compelling is that you end up walking through the lives of not only the characters you meet, but also of characters that have long since died. You'll also be able to see characters that don't have their own particular memories, but appear multiple times on the memories of separate different characters, allowing you to see different facets of their lives and come to your own conclusion about what kind of people they were and what was their effect on the world. And it's on those moments that actually make you rub at least two brain cells together to figure out how different characters are related and the pain of their individual struggles that I thought the lore could get kind of really cool actually. And of course, propping this entire thing up is a cast of immediately recognizable anime fashion rejects that are immensely sympathetic. Not only because they live in a fucked up world, but also because you delve into their fucked up memories, showcasing the hardships different groups of people go through in the anime post-apocalypse, and that despite all that fucked upness, everyone is actually alright, distinct in personality, but with nary an asshole in sight, and never letting childish shit get in the way of doing important survival stuff, as well as endless understanding of other people's situations. They might not dress like you'd expect apocalypse soldier vampires to dress, but they certainly act more mature than the usual cast of anime characters. And you know what? Fuck you if you don't think they look cool as shit in an exaggerated way, because they fucking do, and it's charming as all hell to me, so yeah, I like them. What I also like are the gameplay systems that developers use to distinguish themselves from the usual Souls fare, the main one being blood codes. You see, in Code Vein, whenever you level up, you just spend haze and you level up, and that's it. You don't assign points to specific stats like in Souls games, you just grow in whatever way the game wants you to grow. Which lacks the depth the Souls series had, but not really, because in fact the depth went to the blood code system. A class system that is way better than any of the Souls series games. And yes, I'm aware I'm going to get shot by saying this, but I like it immediately when I first met it, just for the fact it eases and in fact encourages experimentation way more than the Souls series usually does. Blood codes, you see, are basically different classes you unlock as you progress through the game. They define your stats, they define what weapon types you can use at all, and they also define what passive skills and what active skills you can use at any given time. Not all skills are immediately available when you unlock your blood code. Some of them are tied to vestiges, which are the important gameplay use I mentioned before and didn't elaborate on. Basically, when you find memories related to a specific blood code, you can unlock the use of certain skills in the blood codes, but that's not even what really makes them great. The trick that makes blood codes so great is even simpler. It is the fact that you can exchange them at any time, anywhere, for any reason. Hell, you can even change them mid-battle if you really want to, and while some skills are completely tied to a specific blood code, most of them can be mastered by either killing a lot of enemies while having it equipped, or by simply spending haze and materials, and voila, it's mastered. Mastery means you can equip the skill even if you are not using its blood code, which allows for even deeper mix and match fuckery than you'd have thought at first glance, essentially creating a system that not only allows you to create builds just as deep as Dark Souls, but also change them at the drop of a hat in search of stronger, cooler builds, or just ones that feel better for you to personally play with. And it's all pretty great stuff. Another thing that I really enjoyed that deeply impacts the game much more than you think is the fact that the default way to play the game is to have an AI partner accompany you at all times. The usual Souls fare, god, how many times am I said that on this video? But basically the usual Souls fare is normally a pretty lonely experience with occasionally summoning some help from the alternate dimension of the internet to help you fight some tough-ass boss battles, but Code Vein is a lovely game that loves you very much and doesn't want you to feel too lonely and overwhelmed, so it included a complimentary apocalypse buddy with your purchase because it is just that gosh darn nice of a game. You can also invite an online co-op buddy, which doesn't substitute the NPC partner at all, which means you can go around like a trio of complete doofus, feeling more like a funky JRPG party going on the usual adventure than the dark tone of the game implies possible. Exploring the ruins of post-apocalyptic anime society with a friendly NPC radically alters the experience in several ways, starting with the fact enemies can get stunned by attacks from both you and your partner, and each triggers a different attacked animation that the enemy must go through before they can begin attacking you, which basically allows you to essentially coordinate with your partner to stun lock and beat the shit out of them before they are even allowed to move. You can also let your partner aggro them and take the hit while you stay away and take a quick sip, since healing in this game is actually slower than fucking Bloodborne, which is weird for a game that certainly feels more fast-paced than any Soulsborne game, but yeah. Moving on, partners can also resurrect you from the almost grave by spending a bit of their own health, assuming they didn't get their skills sealed. And you can do the same. If you run around like a complete idiot, partners can also stun lock an enemy you carelessly walked into, allowing you to do a 180 real quick and beat the shit out of your would-be ambushers before they can get in a single hit, though unfortunately they can't protect you from one-hit kill traps and deadly fouls. they have their limits after all. So, as you can probably have guessed by now, they make the experience tremendously more forgiving. But you can turn them off and go on your own for the true Dark Souls experience if you really want to. I didn't, because the simple gameplay advantage of having a partner to take a few hits while I heal made the entire thing roughly 1200% more fun than I usually have with these kinds of games. But mainly actually because Yakumo is best boy and you can fucking fight me if you want to. I will gladly die on this hill for tank boy. In the end, the game is still challenging and can kill you when you least expect if you play it like a button masher, since every attack you miss plays a decently long enough animation for you to be punished by every single enemy you meet. And also you are expected to dodge slash block and punish bosses doing their own long attack animations. And there's also of course the stamina bar that exists solely to stop me from button mashing the shit out of down bosses. Yes, I'm on to you developers, I know you still keep that shit around specifically to piss me off. Jokes aside, the stamina system is kind of a good limiter, and of course, all of the stuff I mentioned is eased up by having a partner to pick up your slack, but it doesn't become in existence. And refusing to engage with the main gameplay loop of combat on its own terms will definitely hurt you, especially come the later stages where the game just starts dropping teleporting enemies with high attack outputs and too much health to be efficiently stun-locked into oblivion. Which is good, you can't let Best Boy make this a complete cakewalk after all. But not everything is perfect. As usual for a game this ambitiously big, there's always a little bit of trouble in paradise. So it's time to quickly go through the stuff that is not so good, starting with the level design, which is completely 100% great in my opinion until after the White Cathedral of getting lost for hours, at which point it kind of becomes too linear at times. Make no mistake, there are still plenty of optional paths and shortcuts and cool little sequence breaking moments, but most of those feed you right back into the same area where you started, rather than interconnecting areas or doing something more interesting than that. And at those points, your only option to reach the next area is to go to the obvious boss arena at the other end of the map and defeating it, at which point you will unlock a door somewhere that goes to the next complex but ultimately linear area, which feels too much like a linear line of levels rather than the interconnected world you interacted with in the beginning. And that kinda sucks, since at the beginning the world is so open you can even easily sequence break into the technically third boss if you feel like it, and you really can't do that anywhere else. The story also feels like it misses quite a few opportunities by not elaborating on a few plot points and specific characters. Like for example, at the very beginning of the game, you know that the society is ruled with an iron fist by a big bad dude that actually is not so big and bad and technically justified in his actions, but is he really? Well, you can't figure that out for yourself, since the society is ruled with an iron fist plot is kind of dropped and the character doesn't really show up until the very end and doesn't even get. Technically, he does get a few lines, but barely any throughout the game for you to really take a feel for it, and I feel like that was a missed opportunity. The partner AI isn't the best AI either. It works a lot better than most partner AIs in games I've played, though I don't know if that's because they have some unfair advantage to even the playfield, like secret buffs that I could notice. Though what I do know for a fact is that they can't fall down the same endless pits you can unless something pushes them off really hard, which is great. But other than that, it's actually kind of hard to synchronize with them to pull off what you need to pull off that I mentioned earlier, namely the stun locks I so love and adore. And even if you let them take chunks out of enemies and bosses' life bars, sometimes they will just randomly aggro on you anyway and beat the shit out of you while you're just trying to take a quick sip. Some bosses are also just kind of bullshit, really, being able to summon AoEs from across the arena to hit you and your partner simultaneously whenever they feel like it, and one of the bosses has an attack that is so RNG, I went looking for tips online and the only one I found that was meaningful was to just use a defense buffing skill and praying to my god of choice that I don't get hit by it. And yeah, that's good design. Another complaint I have is about the memories, which are really cool, but at the same time can be a bit boring since all you do is walk around while scenes play around you, and everything uses the same blue texture and the same sad music that keeps playing it, which can easily make one memory bleed into another if you try to see all vestiges in bulk during the same visit to the home base. And that's not really good at all, especially since they're usually meant to be highly impactful emotional moments in collectible form. And finally, of course, I had to mention the DLCs, which are just recycled materials from the main game, with one new boss each, and are just fucking garbage and should not be bought. Fair warning, I didn't buy them because people warned me not to buy them. And I'm not in the habit of buying garbage, so maybe they're secretly great, but I wouldn't count on that. And thinking about it, this game also has a problem with recycled assets in a few places, though the place it is the most recycled is also one of my favorite and actually least favorite places, so, you know, complex feelings. Overall, that's it for the negatives, unless I forgot some minor shit, but if it's so minor I forgot, then it's probably not important, I hope. They are problems indeed, but overall, to me, personally, they are very minor parts of the experience compared to the bigger picture of what Code Vein is and what it tries to accomplish, and honestly, I don't even think they are intentional design flaws. Code Vein, after all, was announced a hell of a long time ago in the long forgotten times of 2017 with a very stylish, very cool teaser trailer that immediately caught my attention and interest. But the road to actually revealing gameplay, to the demos, and the release date announcement was a long process. Maybe I didn't dig deep enough, but I haven't personally found anything that explicitly declares developmental troubles or lack of faith in the product. But if that was the case, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was just announced too early, but if that was the case, I can definitely believe that that happened, given how the beginning of the game ended up feeling and playing a lot more ambitiously than the middle segments, even if, and let me state this right now, shit definitely picks up before the ending and leaves it on a satisfying note. But let me tell you right now that if a lack of budget and faith from Bandai Namco was why this game didn't reach the heights most Soulborn games do, at least in world design and obligatory Season Pass DLC bullshit if and nothing else, then hopefully the 1 million copies sold worldwide will shut the executives up next time Project Vein needs money to inject into their vampire waifus and husbandos. Until then, let me leave this video on a positive note by saying this game is by far my most personally favorite and gratifying Souls-like experience. Though I didn't play Demon Souls or Dark Souls 3 yet, so who knows really if it'll stay that way in the future, but honestly it probably will. The aesthetic, the soundtrack, which I didn't even comment much on because I lack the necessary depth to describe music, but rest assured it's very fire, and even the gameplay offering that weighty, consequence-filled melee weapon ballet that Souls games usually do, but with a partner to pick up my slack and thus encourage me to go out and explore more of the world, unlike in Dark Souls where I just jumped at every shadow. Honestly, all of this makes for a really good time, like one of the goodest times I had in recent years, no exaggeration, and I can gladly recommend this to just about anyone, from fans of Souls, to people trying to get into Souls, to people who don't like Souls at all. Shit's at its core is just a great hack and slash RPG, and that is the jam I like to butter my bread with. Also, you get a cool mini animation, slow motion, backstabbing stuff happening every time you backstab someone, and the way you backstab is defined by your armor, not even your weapon. Your armor gives off different animations beyond just looking cool as hell. So you know, give it a try for that if you're feeling like you want to do some really stylish backstabbing.